southern bank of the Zambezi in southeastern Africa. It's in what today is in the border between Mozambique and Zimbabwe today. The main ethnic groups that we're going to speak about are the Shona, and the Tona. These are two different ethnic groups. The name Shona here is a bit anachronistic because of the fear that we're going to deal with. They will not call it this way. During the night of the 15th of March, 1561, occurred one of the most renowned martyrdoms in sub-Saharan Africa. The Portuguese Jesuit missionary Gonçalo Silveira was executed on the direct orders of the Mono Motapa, the head of the dominant political entity stayed on the southern bank of the Zambezi at the time in today's Zimbabwe. Efforts by the Portuguese administration and the Jesuits to reconstruct the events of the murder, to understand its motives, and to try and locate Silveira's body started almost immediately after the murder and continued for a few generations, more or less, until the final expulsion of the Jesuit order from all the Portuguese territories in 1759. For 200 years, they are looking for his body. Thanks to these inquiries, we have now a solid idea not of what occurred on the night of the murder, but of what was thought to have happened at that night. This, as will be explained in what follows, is far more important for the purpose of understanding the reasons for the murder than what actually happens. The reasons for the murder were initially provided by the father's translator, Antonio Caiado, in 1561. Caiado claimed that Silveira was wrongfully accused by the spiritual consultants of the Mono Motapa, the Ngangas, of being a sorcerer and murui. It was also claimed that he had been originally sent by the Portuguese to spy and to prepare the conquest of the Mono Motapa, and that he was an envoy of a local lord or chief named Chapute. The explanations for the murder that appear in modern scholarship derive by and large from those provided originally by Caiado in 1561. The broadest consensus in modern scholarship accepts that Caiado's claim that Silveira was regarded as a sorcerer, a wizard, which was the main reason for which he was murdered. Now, in this paper, what I will try to show that given the fact that this murder occurred in a precise cultural context, that it was ordered and reasoned and performed by people possessing an extraordinary complex cultural worldview and cosmology, of which we have substantive documentation since the beginning of the 16th century, the claim that Silveira was executed because he was regarded as a sorcerer is not only extremely simplistic, but also exceedingly culturally biased and Eurocentric. To decipher and contextualize the motives for the murder of Gonçalo Silveira, I will begin by re-examining the documentation on which the evidence for this murder case is based. Based on comparison with other contemporary sources, I show that some of the facts presented in these documents, in the early documents, are simply wrong. Then I will examine the Portuguese historical and ethnographic documentation available and some of the oral traditions of the population of the region in order to prove that Silveira was perceived as a traitor or empowered, possessed or empowered by a foreign spirit, or by being one himself, and this specific, we will try to locate this specific spirit that the local people thought empowered or possessed Gonçalo Silveira. Interpretation of the actions and motives for the murder of Gonçalo Silveira are generally based on two substantial documents produced in the year 1561. The first is a letter written by Antonio Caiado, the translator who accompanied Gonçalo Silveira to the Zimbabwe, the capital of the Mono Motapa, in January 1561. We're speaking about this region, this is the Mono Motapa Kingdom. Gonçalo Silveira reached Zimbabwe in January 1561. Antonio Caiado's letter provides the motives for the murder. The second document is a letter written by Luis Frois, head of the Jesuit College of Sao Paulo in Goa at the time, on December 15, 1561. This document of Freud provides the description of the acts, the actual acts performed by the murderers. Freud's letters contains a very detailed account of the murderers' actions based on the eyewitness of two of the translator, Caiado's servants, two local persons. Yeah? According to the witnesses, these two servants, the murder occurred inside a hut, a little house, at night. It was performed by 7 or 8 men. One of them was a man called the Mugurume, a very high-ranking official at the court of the Monomotapa. The Mugurume laid the father, Gonçalo Silveira, on his chest. 4 men seized him from the legs and from the arms, while 2 other men tied a ribbon from one side of his neck and the other side of his neck, and they pulled until he died from suffocation. Later on, they tied a rope around his neck, and they dragged him on his back and threw his body into the Mosangesi River. Now, Caiado's letter provides the motives for the murder. Caiado claims that those responsible for the murder were the Muslim Ngangas, who served as the spiritual advisors to the Monomotapa. According to Caiado, the Muslim Ngangas manipulated the Monomotapa and persuaded him to order the execution of Gonçalo Silveira using false accusations. They did so in order to maintain their political and religious influence on the ruler of the Monomotapa. According to Caiado, the Ngangas stipulated that Silveira was a sorcerer, a Muroi. They claimed that he was sent by the Portuguese authorities who were seeking to take control of the Monomotapa's kingdom, and that he was sent to provoke a local revolt by his rival named Chapute or Chepute, who is mistakenly identified by Freud and by modern research as another local king, the Quitebe. Later on, explain why it cannot be the Quitebe. Now, to comprehend the motives for the murder, it is essential to understand what the local people believed or claimed that has happened. However irrational and contradictory these explanations may appear. Evidence of Silveira's guilt, which Caiado and Freud claimed to be given by the Ngangas, and which has been ignored or uncritically reported in part of modern research, can help us transcend the simplistic categories used in documentation and in modern research. Now, to prove their accusations, the Ngangas, the spiritual consultants of the Monomotapa, claim as follows. A, that Silveira was determined to kill the Monomotapa and the entire population of the land by persuading them to become Christians and by splashing water on their heads, which according to them was the poison that used to conquer the land and to bring the Monomotapa's subject under Silveira's control without them being able to resist. Yeah. B, that Silveira carried with him a bone that he had stolen from a grave and many other poisons that he intended to use to do away with the king. C, that he will cause drought and famine. D, that if he is not killed, he will suddenly disappear, he will vanish. And as a consequence, the people of the land will begin to kill each other without any apparent reason. E, that he should be thrown into the river and his body not left exposed to the sun, otherwise it will poison all the people. And F, he was seen walking naked from the waist up near the president of the king's palace. He had taken away from the president bags of wood and tied them to his shirt. And because of this act, lightning descended from the sky and broke a pole from the king's doorway. Now, incoherent and irrelevant as they may seem, these claims are crucial to understand how Silveira was perceived locally. More, if it will be demonstrated that the actions described as being performed during the murder are unmistakably related to the explanations of the Ngangas aimed at proving Silveira's guilt. And this by the way, it's not accidental. The actions that they perform are exactly correlated with this explanation. A significant indication that helps us place Silveira's murder in context is the mention by Callado, the translator, that the Gangas claimed that Silveira was sent by a person named Chapute, who Freud and later the scholars mistakenly identified as the Kiteve. The error, they mistakenly identified him as the Kiteve, and the error is part of an addition that Freud made in his letter based upon information provided by Callado. And I explain this. Here, Callado claims the following: that the father also came by command of Shepute to ask the Morefos why they would not acknowledge him as their lord, and took one for the king who had no right for the title. Now, Freud copied exactly the same thing and added explanations in them. So Freud said, that the father also came by command of Chapute, meaning the Kiteve, who is another king of Sofala, who had been his servant and had revolted, to ask the Morefos, who are the noble of the kingdom, why they would not acknowledge him as their lord, and took one for the king who had no right for the title. Now, Freud did not visit in the region, in the Zambezi Valley. So this information is based on other persons. Now, the identification of Shepute or Chapute as the Kiteve by Freud is clearly wrong. Comparing Callado's excerpt with a section in a document produced a decade later by the Jesuit Francisco de Monclaro brings this mistake to light. Monclaro accompanied the campaign of Governor Francisco Barreto in the 1570s to conquer the mines of the Mono Mutapa. During Francisco Barreto's campaign, the Portuguese engaged in battle with a specific group that the Portuguese referred to as Mungazes. Mungazes. One of these group's lords, Fumus in the local language, is described by Monclaro as follows, and I quote: "Near the field of battle was the place of the chief, a great warrior named Capute, who defended the entrance to the land of the Mungaz and made great efforts to defend this place." End of quote. Now, no Portuguese documentation in the 1560s and the 1570s recalls any feud or violent actions between the Monomotapa and the Kiteve. There is much, however, evidence of ongoing conflicts between the Monomotapa and the lords of the Mungazes. Now, the Couto describes that the lord, the specific lord of the Mungazes at the period, was being revolted against the Monomotapa, and that he was almost as powerful as the Monomotapa himself. Moreover, this group that is identified in the 16th and 17th century, until the middle of the 17th century, the Mungazes, are said to live in the region between the forts of Sena and Tete. And from their geographic location, we can deduce that this group is the same as the one identified in Portuguese documents since the middle of the 17th century as the Utongas, or Tonga population of the same region. This is the Tonga population. Now today, or more in the 70s, there was a Pondoro, a local spirit in the region, in this region specifically, in the border between Mozambique and Zimbabwe, in a region that is called Dante, which is a spirit which is called Chipute, in this specific region, and there was a lord, a local fumu, local chief, which is called Chapute. Okay, so it is clearly not the Kiteve, and this is an important thing. It is not the Kiteve, and it is specifically that is related to the population of the Tonga. The population of the Tonga in this region, as well as those of the Tavara, you see here, are regarded in oral traditions of the modern Shona group as the owners of the land, meaning the population which their ancestors, the Shona ancestors, encountered during the migration to the region. The main spirit cult of this population is one that is called Ziva Guru Karuba. This cult was adopted by the migrant Shona groups and at least in the period in which the monomotafa prevailed, the mediums of this spirit, of this foreign spirit, belong to the Tonga and to the Tarawa population. So this is a specific spirit of the Tarawa population, the Zivagur Karuba. Now in Shona cosmology, different categories of person are perceived as possessing supernatural powers. According to Butcher, Land, and Gelfand, the most feared witches among the Shona are those possessed by foreign spirits, which are called, there are two different types of foreign spirits. One is called Mushabi and the other is called Ngozi, which endow the witches with magical power that they possess them. A person does not do evil things or magic because he wants to do that, but because some spirit possesses him. Okay? Now, to understand the nature of a certain witch or a sorcerer, we must understand the type of the spirit to which it is related. In the case of Gonçalo Silveira, the foreign spirit, or the Mushabi, the specific Mushabi, which he was associated with and thought to be empowered or possessed, was the Zivaguru Karuba and Shikara, which is, I'll explain in a second what Shikara is. Now, the Zivaguru, which can be literally translated as the Great Lake or the Great Pool, Ziva, Lake, Guru, Lake, is one of the most common spirit cults among the population of the southern bank of the Zambezi Basin until today. Shikara is sometimes identified in modern oral tradition as Zivaguru's great-granddaughter, but according to other traditions, Shikara is identified as a male medium or a priest of Zivaguru. Now, the fact that Gonçalo Silveira was associated in local perception with the Zivaguru, Karuba, and Shikara is obvious when one compares the accusations leveled by the Ngangas, which I described earlier, and the actions that were said to occur during the murder, with ethno-historical description to be found in Portuguese documents from the 16th to the late 19th century. Now, in the local oral traditions, there are various versions of the story of the creation of this great pool of the Zivaguru. Even if the names of the main protagonists may vary, these various versions share a common pattern. And this is a very famous story. It's like the Exodus of the Shona. We're now in Passover, It's like the Exodus of the Shona. So there's a lot of versions that is very known. It's not something esoteric. Now, the earliest and complete recorded version of the creation of the Zivagur is found in Albino Manuel Pacheco's diary from the 1860s, but there are elements of the Zivagur that can be found since the 16th century, and I'll show that. Now, this specific tradition recorded by Albino Manuel Pacheco, it begins with the migration to the region of a small group of elephant hunters led by a man called Mutota. Now, in the process of the conquest of the land, Mutota died on top of a mountain, which is called Chilekashangonia. He was succeeded by his son, who is called Matope, who continued his father's conquest. At some point of the process of the conquest was halted, was stopped because of resistance offered by a local princess named Shikara. And you will see that the gender of Shikara changes. Sometimes it's a male, sometimes it's a female. Who was much more powerful than Matope. Now, Pacheco related that in order to defeat this Princess Shikara, a man called Chikuma informed Matope that he must adorn the heads of his soldiers with ribbons made of shells. Now, following these instructions, Matope and his warriors engaged in battle with Shikara, who upon seeing them decided to flee. Now, during her persecution by the forces of Matope, she disappeared in a place called Nakakote, creating a lake named Shoma, where she and her followers were said to have drowned themselves and disappeared. Okay? Now, a 20th century version of this story was recorded by Michael Gurion. According to Gurion, the senior ancestor of the dynasty, named Nyabapa, is the same as Matope. Was a direct descendant of Mutota, the same father of Matope, defeated the people of a place called Choma. He was able to achieve this by extorting from a prisoner the method by which he could overcome Kuruba's magical power. He is Kuruba and not Shikara. Yeah, and it's a male and not a female. Now, Uruba's power included the ability to hide himself with all his people inside a thick mist. And now after Karuba realized that he was betrayed, he descended with his skin, with all of his people, into a magical pool that never dries out, which bordered with a sacred wood, and he was never seen again. Now the connection between the 16th century Mungazish that we spoke earlier about the October population, the traditions regarding the creation of the great pool of Zivaguru, and the murder of Gonçalo Silveira can be illustrated by using an excerpt from João dos Santos, a Dominican friar from the same period in the 1580s, yeah, which is called Ethiopia Oriental, the book that he wrote. Now, the excerpt from Santos follows the description of the battle between this population of the Mungazes and Francisco Barreto in the 1570s. And he says the following. Beneath these mountains of Lupata, near the river on the eastern bank, in front of the land of the Mungaj, there is a beautiful lake, 3 leagues in circumference, and very deep, and in its center there is a very high island, about 500 brasas in circumference. This lake is called by the Kafa, the Ufumba. It has fresh water, many good fish, hippopotami, and very big crocodile. On its edge there is a grove, a wood, yeah, which the Kafa is called Shipanga, very fresh and full of wild trees. The Kafa living in proximity of this grove of wood, buried their dead in it, and it is perceived by all of them as a very sacred place. The principal reason for this being that the crocodiles of the Ufumba lie under the sun on the borders of this grove, and according to the costume, the Kafas believe that these are the souls of the deceased, which are inside the crocodiles and live inside the lake. This is from the 1580s. Okay? The elements here of the Zivaguru exist in the 1580s and go on. You can find elements of this tradition in the 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, 19th century. Now, the diverse elements, including the sacred pool and the sacred wood, which are part of the Zivaguru traditions, are presented in this excerpt from Santos, which is associated with the Mungazish population. With this specific population, which is thought that after the 17th century they are called the Botongas, and the Zivaguru Karuba is its main cult. Also present is the perception. This excerpt is also associated with Mungazes. Also present is the perception that the souls of the ancestors of these people live in this pool inside the crocodiles. And this is important. This later point of the crocodiles is connected with Silveira's case. Although Freud claimed in his letter that Silveira's body was thrown into the Mozambique River, this fact was disputed by contemporary sources. In Oriente Conquistado de Jesus Cristo, written by Francisco de Sousa in 1710, he claimed that there was another letter written by Caiado 8 days after the murder, and was sent to another friend. And according to Sosa, Caiado claimed that Silveira's body was thrown into a lake and not into a river, and I quote from Sosa. They tied him up to a wooden pole and threw him into a lake, which is located on top of a mountain, which is the source of the Mozambique and the Motete rivers. From here originated the varied information, some saying that he was thrown into the Mozambique, and some thrown into the Motete. And Sosa also gives further evidence for this claim based on the letter of later periods that Silveira was thrown into a lake, into a great lake, and not into the Mozambique River. He claims that, and I quote, the fact that a lake and not a river was the first sepulture of Father Gonçalo Silveira is related in a letter of Father Gaspar Soares, written in Tete on the 17th of July in 1611. And here's a quote within a quote. I found a very old man. He said that he was baptized by Father Gonçalo Silveira on the Mocaranga Road. This man told me that the Father Gonçalo Silveira, when martyrized, his body was thrown into, not into a river, but into a great lake. Now, there are some less obvious elements in the exodus of Santos that we read earlier, which are connected or related between the Zivagu and the murder of Gonçalo Silveira. The first element is the crocodile, seen as carriers of the soul of local ancestors. Now, according to modern Shona traditions, all the aquatic totems, all the totems that the fish, the hippopotami, the crocodile, the snake, the water snake, all of them originated from the Zivagu, from the Great Lake. This is the place to mention that following the murder of Gonçalo Silveira, the Portuguese have gone a great length in order to locate the whereabouts of the body by collecting information from the indigenous population. Now, this they do until 1759. They try to find his body until very late, 200 years later. Now, Diogo de Couto explained that during the campaign, during Barreto's campaign in 1571, the Jesuit Father Francisco Monclao insisted on taking the same route that Silveira took to the Monomotapa to see whether his holy remains could be found. Now, Diogo de Couto claimed that this was impossible, and why? And I quote, all the men who had at the time traded in the lands of the Monomotapa affirmed that as soon as the body of this same father was thrown into the river, it was eaten and swallowed by the reptiles and the crocodiles, so it could not appear but in the last universal judgment. End of quote. Now, the claim that Silveira was eaten by crocodiles, not only thrown into the river, became, since the 1570s, an integral part of the story of the Martyrdom. It's included in the Vita written by Gurion in 1614. It's included that he was eaten and swallowed by the crocodile. Now, in the ethnographic documentation of the region, since the 16th century onward, and this is very consistent, the indigenous population of the southern bank of the Zambezi believed that the liver of a crocodile is the most dangerous and harmful poison that exists. Monclaro, Francisco de Monclaro, in the 1570s claimed that, and I quote, about the liver of reptiles and crocodiles, the Kafirs say that it is the greatest poison and the quickest to kill, or one of the quickest to kill, end of quote. Now, this belief regarding the liver of the crocodile is persistent until today. Moreover, African crocodile hunters today, they need to be seen cutting the organs of the crocodile and throwing them back into the water, so they won't be accused of creating poison for sale. This happens until today. Now, Freud explains that the murder of Gonçalo Silveira, and you remember the reasons that we said? Now, Freud explained that the murder of Gonçalo Silveira was ordered by the king to throw the body into the river, and I quote, his body should not be left under the sun because the poison of that man was sufficient to contaminate them all, end of quote. Now, another connection between the Ufumba lake that we saw in Santos and the story of Silveira lies in the etymology of the name Ufumba, which means in Chinyongwe, means to strangle, to suffocate, or to drown, which is obviously related both to the myth of the Zivagu that drowned in the lake, created the lake, and the Silveira's institution, which was strangled. Now, there are other things that are not emphasized in Santos' excerpt about the Ufumba. Both Shikara and Karuba, which are related to the Zivagu, was said to have disappeared spontaneously and never to be seen again. Now, according to Callado, the Ngangas, the spiritual consultants of the Monomotapa, warned the Monomotapa that if Silveira was not killed, he would disappear without them knowing. He was vanished. Gonçalo Silveira was also accused by the Nganga of commanding the sun and causing drought and famine. Both Portuguese document an oral tradition ascribed to Shikara, the prince that we talk about, and Karuba, the ability to cause drought and famine. The local spirit, the spirits of the king, they provide rain, and the Zivaguru and Shikara and Karuba prevent the rain. Okay, so they cause drought. Now, the anonymous author of a text called the Stando Império do Monomotapa, até quando morreu de Zambezi, from the 18th century, writes the following about Chikara. He said, they have 3 priests, a great one named Chikara. This one never comes in the presence of the emperor of the Monomotapa, nor is he called to come to him. Here is a male, Chikara. Only in the times of their sowing, the emperor sends an envoy to ask for rain, that's not to prevent the rain. This one is a fine thief that whenever he can take anything from the emperor as well as from his vassals, he will steal it in order to make himself more powerful. So again, Gonçalo Silveira is related, is accused of bringing drought and famine. Chikara and Jivaguru and Aruba are doing the same thing. Now, another important element is the use of the bark of trees and the wooden pole. Silveira was accused by the Ngangas that he was seen for several days walking naked from the waist up near the wall of the house of the king, from where he took barks of wood from the trees and he tied them to his shirt. This act was said to be followed by a lightning that broke a pole, one of the poles in the door of the king. Now, according to oral traditions presented by Michael Gurion, Karuva was accused of cutting trees in the land that was not his own, which is a local way to say to be rebel. Someone who is a rebel, he cuts trees in a place that he shouldn't cut trees. This is the same thing that they accused Gonçalo Silveira of doing. Now, the description of half-naked Silveira is also related to the Zibaguru Karuva. In its medium, the Zibaguru entry in the Dictionary of African Mythology describes him as follows, and I quote, Zibaguru, god of water, was a simple man who wore his hair long and nothing but the skin about his loins. Gonçalo Silveira was naked, half-naked, is described as going half-naked. Yeah? Also, Zibaguru is described as such. Now, in Portuguese documents from the 16th century onward, Chikara is regarded as the prototypical traitor, rebel, and usurper. A precise ritual related to Chikara is performed during the coronation of a new Monomotapa. And this is described in the documents of the 18th century. Now, the connection between the rituals performed during the coronation of the Mukaranga kings and the Monomotapa specifically and Chikara derives from the fact that these rituals reenact the tradition of the migration that I told earlier, the migration of the Mukaranga, of Matope, and he conquered the land, and then Zibagu Chikara went into the pool and created the pool. Now, this tradition is reenacted in the coronation. The rituals in the coronation of the Monomotapa reenact this same tradition. This is the relation between the two things. Now, in 1766, Antonio Pinto Miranda provided a straightforward account of the connection between the rituals performed during the coronation of the Monomotapa and Chikara. And I quote, this same sacrifice they do to a Bazimo, Chikara, who was a chief and pretended through an uprising to be emperor, and after he failed, he drowned himself in a lake with all his generation in order to release himself from the punishment for his rebellion and from the attack by the emperor at the period. And in memory of this exasperated resolution, they make the mentioned sacrifice. Thus, part of the coronation, the rituals in the coronation of the Monomotapa are related to Chikara and the usurpation. And you will see it in a second. Now, the rituals related to Chikara's story, performed during the coronation of the Mukaranga kings and the Monomotapa, are the exact same actions that were carried out during Silveira's murder. Precisely the one that described the fate of the usurper or the rebel Monomotapa defeated in battle. These rituals are documented in several documents of ethnographic documents of the 18th century. For example, Castro, Dionisio de Melo Castro, in 1763, he explained the fate of a beaten Monomotapa and what happens if the throne of the Monomotapa was won by usurpation, and what happens to the Monomotapa that lost. Okay, and I quote. The emperor who dies on the occasion of battle, it is prohibited to any munyal, any soldier, to kill him or injure him. Being defeated by his adversary, he is obliged to lean his back against a tree, and by picking up a branch of that tree, he signals his surrender. Now, this part of this expert is related to Karuva and the poles and the cutting of part of trees. Okay. Now, the continuation of this excerpt from Castro shows that the succession to the throne, if it's not peaceful, it reenacts exactly the battle between Matope and Shikar. And I quote, being subjected to the will of the victor, who puts him under custody, in that same place he is given for 3 days all the splendor and honors, and at the end of these days he is notified that he must kill himself with a musheka or a ribbon. Strangled. This execution is assisted by the matumzes, who are the dukes, marquises, and counts, and by the priests, who serve as the executors in order to finally finish him. End of quote. Earlier in the text, Castro identifies the mutamzes, these dukes, marquises, and all of these priests, by their title, by their own names. One of them is called the Mukurumen, which is the only person involved in the assassination of Gonçalo Silveira, which is recognized by the servants of Antonio Cayano, the translator. This ritual is described also 30 years later in the Descripción Imperium Monotapa. Now, the anonymous author of this document claims the following, and I quote, when the emperor is defeated in war, he cannot flee, and the victor cannot kill him in another manner than strangulation. The victor sends to build a big house made out of wood, and after this house is built, the lord and priest grasp the defeated emperor from one side, and from another, they take him into that house and strangle him. End of quote. Now, the descriptions of the execution of a traitor or rebel in the 18th century, which, as we saw, are related to the myth of Shikara and reenacted, correlate with the acts reported by Cayano's servant to have been performed during the murder of Gonçalo Silveira. Gonçalo Silveira was strangled to death with a ribbon inside the hut when his arms and legs were held by these executors, which one of them was the Nukurum. So what we did here practically is we identified the local perception, the local understanding in local religious conceptualization of what happened in this situation. Now, why is this important? Why it is important to do this precise thing? Because if we do not account for the local conceptualization, the local cultural language, we cannot understand specific actions that occur, that are done. In the Vita of Gonçalo Silveira, this was the deterministic notion that this was said to happen, that this must have happened. This is not the case. We can understand the local perception and the local understanding of why this occurs, and it's totally different. It doesn't have much to do with the perception of the Christian perception of the perception of the Jesuits and the Portuguese later on. So that's it.